I'm joined live by the Defence Minister Peter Dutton. Peter Dutton, thanks so much for your time. Penny Wong has put national security back front and centre today. She says that you've been amping up the prospect of war against a superpower and that is the most dangerous election tactic in Australian history. Is that what you've been doing?
Well, of course, it's a nonsense, Kieran. I mean, today's speech by Penny Wong could have been written by Paul Keating. I thought it was an appalling contribution at a time when we should be showing national unity in the Indo-Pacific, when we have an uncertain period. By all accounts, Europeans see it the same way as the Americans do, as we do. People are worried about what China is doing and the ramping up of their military activity, not just in the South China Sea, but the East China Sea and across the Indo-Pacific. And the fact that Penny Wong today has marched away from the spirit of the AUKUS agreement, I think demonstrates that Labor is very weak on national security.
Is she not, though, pointing to this comment, you said it would be inconceivable that we wouldn't support the US in an action if the US chose to take that action. That, just to drill down on what you said there, is that not a preemptive commitment?
I think if the Labor Party is saying that the alliance with the United States is not going to be adhered to, or is not Labor Party policy, then they should be express about that. But Anthony Albanese wants to be seen as, tough on border protection and tough on national security and defence matters, and yet it defies his whole career. I mean, this is a guy that was very weak on border protection, was part of the reason that boats arrived and people drowned at sea under the Rudd-Gillard government, and he's now put himself in a position where he's allowed his Foreign Affairs spokesperson, the person who would be the Foreign Affairs Minister in his government, to go out and start to, at least on the comments you've provided, question what their commitment would be under the US alliance, which is quite a startling development.
But on the US alliance, you make reference to that, but the US policy has been this notion of strategic ambiguity when it comes to Taiwan, not to say whether they would or would not come to the aid of Taiwan in the event of an invasion. Have you gone away from that?
Not at all. And if you look,
is that not a preemptive commitment?
No, it's not. And if you look at the comments that I made, I mean, a couple of points. First, and most importantly, I said in those comments that we want peace to prevail in our region. We don't want any sort of conflict. We want a good relationship with China, and we want to make sure that our partners in the region are respected by China, that their sovereignty is not compromised, and that we have the ability to continue and have a prevailing peace in our region. That's the first point I made. The second point was that if there was to be a conflict in Taiwan and the United States was to enter into a conflict with China, then in my judgment, it would be inconceivable, given the conditions of the ANZUS alliance, that we wouldn't be by America's side. We are a middle power, but we have significant equities in the Indo-Pacific, and we are looked at as a responsible country within the region. There are many smaller nations that look to Australia to stand by our principles, and I don't think I've done anything more than enunciate what I thought was a bipartisan position, but it seems the Labor Party now is questioning their commitment to the alliance.
Well, Penny Wong says that your language and that of Mike Pizzullo, talking about the drums of war, it reinforces the China narrative that there's only two options, either unification or war. Are you reinforcing that binary fatalism?
No, we're being very clear that we want a prevailing situation in the Indo-Pacific which involves a status quo, and we don't want China to depart from that. The Communist Party's been clear about their intent to reunify and to go into Taiwan. They've been very clear about that. You don't have to look at my comments, look at the words of any of the Chinese spokespersons. They've been very, very adamant about it. And if Labor is pretending that somehow the Europeans have got it wrong, that the Americans have got it wrong in terms of their assessment of the Communist Party's approach in the Indo-Pacific at the moment, then I think that really sounds significant alarm bells. And if Anthony Albanese continues to be this weak on national security before an election, you can only imagine what he would be like in alliance with the Greens after an election.
The Chinese Foreign Ministry spokesman Zhao Lijian said just in the last few hours, he said that and he called you out specifically, it's unusual, but he said Peter Dutton is obsessed with the Cold War mentality and ideological prejudices.
Well, again,
what do you say to that?
But this is the propaganda.
Is it time to dial it down?
This is the propaganda of the Communist Party, Kieran. I mean, you were there when the ambassador at the time issued the statement of 14 points that Australia needed to proceed to before they would normalise relations. Now, that is unprecedented for any power to do that in our country. There's no other ambassador at the moment running around in China issuing threats to government ministers or criticising Australian government policy. We have a very close relationship with all of our partners, and we're a responsible partner in the region. The Communist Party at the moment has 355 ships and submarines in her fleet, and by 2030 that goes to well over 400. So let's be clear about where China is. They've got 20 points of presence in the South China Sea. They are bumping up against Japanese assets in the East China Sea. There's $20 billion worth of economic coercion against our own country. And if Penny Wong wants to deliver a speech that clearly could have been written by Paul Keating, then I think that shows a very stark difference between the approach of the Morrison government toward what is a very serious situation and that which Mr Albanese would propose if he was to be elected.
Given that strategic landscape that you describe, are you worried that this plan, the AUKUS plan, won't see us have nuclear-powered subs till 2040? And in that context, will you drive a deal, say, with the Swedish to try and get a next-generation Collins-class sub in?
Well, first point is I'm not conceding that subs will arrive in 2040. I think that through the next 12 to 18 months that we're dealing with at the moment, our partners in the United States and the United Kingdom, which was part of the AUKUS agreement, all designed at which boat we're going to choose, which design. A mature design is what we will choose, and we will make a decision to get those vessels, to get those boats into our fleet as quickly as possible. So I will reserve judgment until we get the final readout of that consultation that's taking place at the moment. But there's much more. I mean, we've got the Collins-class submarines at the moment who have regional superiority. That's recognised by our partners. It's recognised by the Communist Party as well. So we already have a very significant contribution to the alliance that we have, the friendship that we have with our partners, including the US, the UK, and more broadly in the region.